Welcome to this Thursday show. Up first, satellite imagery. Out to the west here, nothing but high pressure over the Bering Sea. Still coming up and around, still have this northerly flow that's weakening, though, pulling cold air southward. And as that passes over the open waters of the Bering Sea, picks up some snow and moisture, clouds, and then snowfall along the eastern Aleutians Alaska Peninsula. But winds generally lighter there than today. Got a weak band of clouds coming across the Russian Far East there, but nothing very significant. Really just some storminess out toward the Sea of AKwx. Otherwise, dry over the interior, with a lot of clear skies from the North Slope all the way down into the southwest coast, Bristol Bay area today, as well as Nunivak Island and up across the Seward Peninsula. And then in the east and southeast, we've got variable clouds coming across south central Alaska today, with that breaking out to a fair amount of sunshine over the Kenai Peninsula and northern Cook Inlet this afternoon. And really all the precipitation here from the North Gulf Coast down across the Panhandle today. And we're seeing rainfall today, south to north flow here, pulling milder temperatures up all the way up in toward Skagway this afternoon, or actually earlier today as well, with strong winds, a weak low tracking northward here, brought winds gusting 40 to 55 miles an hour through Lynn Canal on up towards Skagway today, with rain falling across the entire southeast coast, up to an inch in the southern areas. Some areas had anywhere from a third to a half an inch, and other locations in the north even heavier amounts than that. Otherwise, this weak band here bringing some light snow to the North Gulf Coast and into Prince William Sound toward Portage, Whittier, and those areas, and then down across the southern and east side of the Kenai Peninsula. But just to the west, again, some areas of sunshine this afternoon, Cook Inlet, and even more so west of the Alaska Range there. Good sunshine, clear skies, and lighter winds here along the southwest coast than what we saw yesterday and overnight here. And snow showers continuing, with the northeast winds and northeast winds also coming down, with really not much out here to the west at all. Nothing but high pressure to the north, all the way to the Arctic coast. Pretty light winds now coming down from what they were yesterday. Out here to the west, just high pressure ridging up over the western Bering Sea, all the way up into the Russian Far East. And we have this narrow band of snow showers here over the Bering Sea coming right on down into Adak and Atka. But even those amounts on the light side. And then tonight we'll see this next storm here developing. Will move northward and then start to pull back to the to the northwest as another system develops there along the cold front. So that's going to bring a good shot of moisture into the North Gulf Coast along and behind this warm front here, with some snow trying to push into the southern Copper River Basin, and another shot of snow trying to push westward into Turnagain Arm, across Prince William Sound, mostly for the eastern Kenai Peninsula areas. Should stay dry for the most part for Cook Inlet tonight, but increasing chances of snow late tonight and into tomorrow. The several inches of snow you had today, anywhere from 2 to 4 inches there at Kodiak Island. Still looking at that tonight, occasional snow. Becoming a little more showery, and then also drying out over the central and southern southeast coast, but rain and snow continuing for the northern areas tonight, and rain and snow for Yakutat. Could be briefly heavy at times there, as well as over toward Cordova, but still some scattered snow showers here over the Alaska Peninsula. Winds continuing to slowly diminish, but they won't end completely tonight. Even lighter winds with more scattered snow showers here over the central Aleutians, drying out towards Shimei and Attu. Light winds and dry conditions for the northern central Bering Sea, again across the western and northern interior areas. And for Friday, again, a big lack of storminess out here in the west, just ridging high pressure up into the Bering Sea, continuing northeastward into the North Slope. Again, light winds, mostly clear skies, temperatures staying below zero there for the Arctic coast, and dry conditions with light winds into the northern Bering Sea. Still some some scattered snow shower activity here for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, Unalaska, Nikolsky, Dutch Harbor, those areas, but it should be a dry day tomorrow for Adak and Atka, and maybe some clearing farther to the west there. Also possible sunshine for the Pribilof Islands as well, and very nice conditions, light winds, some clearing there for St. Lawrence Island, and much of the western interior. Clouds kind of increasing here over the Kuskokwim Valley into Bristol Bay. This low tracking right up to Kodiak Island, starting to weaken now tomorrow afternoon as it pulls back to the west and northwest from its position, as we'll see tonight. It pulls right over Kodiak Island, and so that's going to keep the front and the precipitation off the southeast coast tomorrow. So you're looking at a dry day with maybe a few sun breaks here across the entire southeast coast up to Yakutat, but rain and snow for the North Gulf Coast, some snow into the Prince William Sound area, Kenai Peninsula, chance of snow now, even northern Cook Inlet, Anchorage to Eagle River. More so, though, for the western Alaska Range, especially southern areas down toward Kamishak Bay and Homer, Seldovia. Have a better chance of some light snow. Kodiak Island, periods of light snow tomorrow with a low center right on top of you, but winds will be on the light side there, and dry and fair with light winds over the interior, especially the northern interior areas on Friday. So from there, taking a look at the first day of the weekend, we'll see another system. Actually, this trough here kind of rotates around, develops into a pretty good storm system, pulling northward here into the southern Gulf of Alaska. So there could be a narrow band of storm force winds into the offshore areas of the Gulf here on the north side there, maybe a little bit in advance of the front, surrounded by gale force winds around that. But again, look for an increasing chance of rain along the southeast coast late in the day with increasing winds. But through the day Saturday, it looks like most of this energy will stay off the Panhandle, so it could be partly sunny, dry day there, and a little bit of moisture up along the North Gulf Coast, but nothing too terribly heavy. Still a chance of snow showers for Kodiak Island, but nothing significant there, even into the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay area. Still isolated showers now for the Alaska Peninsula. This low tracking southwestward there and then southward, kind of just grazing the peninsula with some snow shower activity, and winds continue to diminish there. Dry, light winds, eastern Bering Sea, Pribilof, mostly sunny Nunivak Island, mostly sunny St. Lawrence Island, although seeing an increase in the clouds as that ridge axis edges eastward there. That allows some clouds into mainly Gamble, probably Savunga as well. Otherwise, high pressure dominating the interior, so areas north and west of the Alaska Range looking really nice for the first day of the weekend, all the way up to the Arctic coast, mostly clear skies there. Out to the west, the only thing is this weak trough with some scattered areas of rain and snow over toward the west central Aleutians, really pretty much a non-factor in the weather pattern. So moving on to the low temperatures for tonight, above freezing for the Panhandle, 37 at Skagway for your low, up mid to upper 30s for the remainder of the southeast coast, in the 20s for the North Gulf Coast, Middleton Island right around 32, and down towards zero in the Copper River Basin. 5 to 10 in the Susitna Valley, otherwise teens here over the Kenai Peninsula, lower 20s near Homer, mid-20s for the Kodiak area, 5 to 10 for the lows here, or 0 to 10 for Bristol Bay. 10 to 20 below for the Kuskokwim Valley. Highs tomorrow in the teens for the Kuskokwim Valley. Otherwise, mostly in the 20s, Bristol Bay, upper 30s, Kodiak Island. Mid to upper 30s, south central Alaska tomorrow, and near 40 for the North Gulf Coast. Seward near 40. Upper 20s, Copper River Basin, and the southeast coast in the 40s for your highs. That'll be followed by lows again near 40 along the central coast. Sitka, Port Alexander, staying above freezing most areas, and right around freezing for Yakutat. Lows around 8 there for the Copper River Basin, otherwise teens to mid-20s south central Alaska, near 30 for Kodiak Island, and right around 0 for the Kuskokwim Valley. Up and then highs in the 30s here south central Alaska, call it 35 to 40, and near freezing for the Copper River Basin, 30s most everywhere everywhere else except west of the Alaska Range, and 45 to 50 for your highs in the Panhandle. Lows tonight, again, 15 to 35 below here for the interior areas. Highs tomorrow, 10 to 20, Tanana Valley. Single numbers up toward Bettles to Fort Yukon and Ambler, a little below zero for Kotzebue and below zero for the North Arctic coast. And then the lows, a little milder here, staying above zero in the Fairbanks area, but call it 10 to 25 below for the North Slope Arctic coast. Highs 10 to 20 in the central interior. Chillier out toward the Bering Strait and not so cold from the North Slope to the Arctic coast. Now be followed by, let me back it up, went the wrong way there. Highs, let's see, Saturday afternoon, mid-20s for your highs there for the Fairbanks area, and almost staying below zero for the eastern Arctic coast. Down to the southwest coast, right around zero tonight, mid-teens for the Pribilofs, which is about your current temperature now, and upper 20s to lower 30s for the central western Aleutians, teens to lower 20s for the Alaska Peninsula. Highs tomorrow below freezing for Nikolsky on Alaska, mid to upper 20s Alaska Peninsula, upper 30s as you head west. Lows teens again for the Pribilofs, in the teens to mid-20s for the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, followed by highs in the 30s, all of the Aleutians, lower to mid-30s for the Alaska Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Okay, we've got a lot of IFR. We'll start over here. Coming up from the across the Gulf of Alaska, right in up into the Copper River Basin and eastern North Gulf Coast and the northern Panhandle, but notice VFR over the southern southeast coast, lots of VFR over the interior, then some lower conditions here, IFR northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, and marginal VFR through the Bering Strait and right up along the western Arctic coast. Marginal VFR here for the Alaska Peninsula, some still lingering around Kodiak Island and south central Alaska there, as well as the Aleutians and southern Bering Sea. And then for tomorrow afternoon, really not much change out here to the west. Areas of marginal VFR anywhere over the Aleutians up to the Pribilofs, Alaska Peninsula. Good VFR here along the southwest coast, and VFR now St. Lawrence Island up into the Chukchi Sea, most of the interior here, with except from about the Tanana Valley, Fairbanks, Nenana, down south into the Susitna Valley, some marginal VFR. IFR along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, right on down across Kamishak Bay into northern Kodiak, Fognak Island areas, and IFR here with southeast wind flow, low pressure right in this area, so carrying that IFR right up into Prince William Sound, eastern Kenai Peninsula, into the Talkeetnas, and VFR for the Panhandle. And for Saturday morning, marginal VFR. Most of the southeast coast, but improving as you head down toward Dixon Entrance. A narrow band of IFR now along the North Gulf Coast there, improving over the northern Panhandle. Some leftover IFR here over the eastern interior. Otherwise pretty good, lots of VFR all the way out to the west coast. Marginal VFR back in the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, northern Bering Sea, and mostly marginal for the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. And then for Saturday afternoon, good VFR over interior Alaska. Still some areas of possible marginal VFR here up over the western Cook Inlet to the east or western Alaska Range, Kenai Peninsula there, maybe into the southern Copper River Basin, but not too bad. And Kodiak Island VFR, marginal for the Alaska Peninsula. On Alaska Island VFR, same for Nunivak Island and half of St. Lawrence Island. Adakanatka marginal, next band of IFR at the front. They're pushing into the western Aleutians, but the Arctic coast and the interior are looking good, as well as the southeast coast, all VFR. Anatuvik VFR tomorrow. Same forecast for Adigan. And for Lake Clark, Merrill, IFR, lowest conditions on the eastern entrances of both passes. Same forecast for Rainy. IFR eastern entrance, otherwise looking pretty marginal there. And for Windy, marginal VFR, and for the Isabel Pass, marginal throughout most of the day. On Friday, Mentesta starting out IFR, improving throughout the day, possibly becoming VFR in the afternoon. And for Tanita, IFR on the eastern entrance, otherwise marginal VFR, better out the west side. And Portage, Pretty sure thing it'll be IFR tomorrow. Chilkoot and White, improvement throughout the day, hopefully becoming VFR in the late afternoon. And for the freezing levels here at the surface, 2,000 feet right off the southeast coast there. Surface a little farther inland, and just through Shelikof Strait with that leftover cold air still affecting the Alaska Peninsula, most of the Bering Sea here, and then right between Adak and Atka. Icing, nothing out here to the west. Most of the interior, icing free, just that southeast flow pulling the moisture up. Could be some considerable moderate rime icing here, Prince William Sound up into Turnagain Arm area, western Prince William Sound tomorrow. Otherwise, not too bad for the Panhandle, this staying off the coast. And for the jet stream there, that southeast flow, south-southeast flow kind of turns more southeasterly here over Cook Inlet. That's pulling that moisture up, and higher pressure aloft here over western Canada, keeping that to the west of the southeast coast. A trough axis here over the western interior, and northeast flow, north to northeast flow, 75 to 95 knots across the eastern Bering Sea, about 40 to 45 at this elevation. Southeast 70 into the Kenai Peninsula, southeast 70 at 3,000 feet as well here, and then northeast 40 knots out over the southwest interior. Taking a look at turbulence, moderate turbulence, southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet to Kodiak Island, and areas of the southwest interior. After
Hi, Stargazers, Trace here, and March 20th is the vernal equinox, when our sun is directly over the equator and day and night are equal. In ancient times, the sun passed through Aries in early spring, but today it passes through Pisces because of precession. Precession is the wobble of Earth's axis, and this causes Earth's rotational axis to shift over time, and that causes the constellations to change position in the sky, about a pinky on an outstretched arm every 72 years, which adds up. Let me show you. Face north any night after midnight and look for the Big Dipper asterism. The two end stars, Dubhe and Merak, form an arrow to Polaris, the current North Star. But in 13,000 years, our North Star will be Vega. To find Vega, use the other two bowl stars of the Big Dipper, make an arrow twice as long. That's Vega. It's a super bright star. The sky is eternal and always changing. Just like spring, keep looking up.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and we have a special guest in the studio today. We welcome Amanda Terborg of the Aviation Weather Center. Thanks for joining us, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Amanda's flown in all the way from Kansas City, and for those of you that don't know, the Aviation Weather Center serves the lower 48 for aviators, just as the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit here in Anchorage serves all of Alaska. So I kind of wonder, what's the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City doing to help out Alaska, Amanda?
Yeah, you know, we do a lot of collaboration work with our sister station up here. Lately, we've been doing a lot of work, especially in the satellite meteorology.
Okay.
In particular, we have been looking at ways to better identify icing conditions in clouds, which is a big deal up here because, as I'm coming to find out, even though I'm not from here, you guys have a lot of pilots here.
You have a lot of pilots. In fact, it's, when you say you can't get there from here, that's how you get there.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so with icing potential then, what's Kansas City working on?
Well, we are working on something that will help us, again, identify the icing in the clouds. You don't want ice on your aircraft.
No.
Not only does it add a whole bunch of extra weight to your airframe when it attaches to the wings and the nose cone, but it can also mess with your aerodynamics.
Right.
And in the most serious conditions, that can mess with it enough that you can actually crash.
It changes the shape of the wing, and that makes it sometimes impossible to fly, right?
It does, yeah. So we want to figure out a way to better forecast for that.
Makes sense.
Now this particular image is over Alaska. The colors here are a little goofy. It doesn't look like your run-of-the-mill satellite image.
Okay.
But the red is where you have liquid clouds and the blue is ice. But again, it really doesn't tell you a lot where you have icing conditions in that cloud. Because in those clouds there's little droplets, and they're cold, and they're actually below freezing, but they're still liquid, and that makes them sticky.
Okay.
So when an aircraft flies through there, those droplets are sticking to the aircraft, and it can happen amazingly fast.
Right.
And so that's what we're trying to find. And there is a product called the Aircraft Flight Icing Threat that does this. And it's basically looking at the temperature of the cloud, and it's also looking at the size of the droplets to identify a probability and intensity of those icing conditions.
Okay.
And if you flip to the next image. This is a case from Juneau, Alaska, where this probably wouldn't have been the best day to fly around Juneau.
Okay.
Now, there was an area of moisture that pushed south from the southwest up along the coast that pushed in a stratus layer. And in the stratus layer, there was a lot of those super cooled liquid drops, or a lot of stickiness.
Okay.
And so the flight icing threat was able to, in the pinks and the reds there, was able to identify where that icing was. Now, this is really cool. You know, it's really cool to be able to identify that there is, you know, of course, caveats to every product. Much as we wish it would happen, sun doesn't shine all the time, unless, I guess, if you live in northern Alaska during the summertime.
Right.
But we need that sun to be able to bounce off those clouds and to be able to see where those super cool drops are.
Okay, so it's a daytime only tool.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now, of course, you know, we're in the era of advanced satellite technology, and there is a satellite that can actually use moonlight to see clouds.
Yes.
And so sometime in the future, we hope to be able to do that.
Okay.
Another thing that is a bit of a challenge is multiple layers of clouds. You know, you can only see so far through a thick cloud.
Okay.
And if it's thick enough, sometimes you can't see a layer of icing that's below there.
Right.
But even besides those caveats, this product has a lot of potential to help out Alaskan aviators here.
Well, it sounds like a really big deal, and something that forecasters at the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit could use probably on a daily basis, and especially in the middle of a really big storm.
Yeah, I would think so.
Do you have a really good success story in the lower 48 using this tool?
You know, it's a fairly new product, and so we're still evaluating it. But yeah, we've had a lot of cases where we have seen that it does tend to capture those icing conditions.
Okay, very good. Well, Amanda, thanks so much for sharing some of the very interesting satellite imagery and the tools that you're using there at the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City with us here in Alaska. People can probably find some of this information online, right?
Yeah, here is a website here. It's a page from NASA Langley, and they have this imagery as well as a bunch of other satellite imagery that you can take a look at. Okay, great. And I'm sure our friends at the Alaska Aviation Weather Center and the unit will be using that in the coming months there with your training and your help there to learn more about that tool to help Alaska aviators any day of the year. That's wonderful stuff. So thanks again for joining us, Amanda, and we welcome you to view any of our Alaska weather facts on YouTube anytime at the address below, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And with the coastal water forecast here, south coast of the Panhandle for tomorrow, southeast winds 25 to 30 knots, east-southeast winds 25 to 35 knots on the north coast, and for Lynn Canal, southeast at 15. Stevens Passage, southeast winds 20 knots, and Clarence Strait, southeast at 15 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas here across all of the inside waters. And then for Saturday, east-southeast winds 25 knots on the south coast. Otherwise, east winds 25 knots on the north coast area. And for the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay zones here, north winds at 10 knots. Still southeast at 15 for Clarence Strait, southeast at 20. For southeast 15 for Stevens Passage, southeast 20 for Clarence Strait. And for tomorrow, Friday, Prince William Sound, gale warnings, east winds 40 knots, seas at 10 feet. Eastern North Gulf Coast, gale warnings also. East winds 45 knots, seas around 20 feet, northeast 40 knots for the western North Gulf Coast. Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, gale warnings, north winds 40 knots, northeast winds at 40 knots for southern Cook Inlet. North of the Forelands, though, northeast at 30 knots. And then on Saturday, lighter winds for Cook Inlet, north to northeast 20 to 25 knots. Northeast winds 30 knots here for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, and east-northeast winds 20 to 25 knots for the North Gulf Coast. Prince William Sound, northeast winds now down to 20 knots with seas subsiding to 4 feet. Kodiak Island, north to northwest winds 30 to 40 knots for the day Friday. Alaska Peninsula, north winds 20 to 25 knots, and Bristol Bay, north winds at 25 knots. And for Saturday, Kodiak Island, northeast winds 25 knots. Alaska Peninsula, north to northwest winds here 20 to 30 knots, and Bristol Bay, northeast at 20 knots. Seas only 2 feet. For the western Aleutians on Friday, here we've got west of Kiska, west-northwest at 15 knots. Otherwise, the central Aleutians, north winds at 20 knots. Small craft advisories for the Fox Islands, north winds 25 to 30 knots. And then on Saturday for the eastern Aleutians, northwest winds 25 to 30 knots, seas up to 9 feet. And the central Aleutians west-northwest at about 20 knots. And then small craft advisories here for the western Aleutians, where winds will be southwest 25 to 30 knots. And for the southwest coast, South and Nunivak Island, small craft advisories for north winds or actually brisk wind advisories with the sea ice. North winds 30 knots there, north winds at 20 for the Pribilofs, northwest 15, St. Matthew Island. And for the Yukon Delta coast north at about 15. And for Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, light winds out of the north at about 10. And for Saturday, continued light winds, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, about 10 knots, and 15 knots out of the north for the Yukon Delta coast. Kuskokwim Delta coast, north at 25, Pribilofs, northwest at 20 knots, and St. Matthew Island looking at a south wind for the first day of the weekend at 25 knots. And not bad wind-wise here north of the Bering Strait. Whales up to Cape Beaufort, south to southeast winds 10 to 15 knots. Otherwise, the Arctic coast, south or south-southeast winds at about 10 knots. And then on Saturday, more of an easterly direction here for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, 10 to 15 knots, central and western Arctic coast, southeast winds at 15 knots, and then from Wales to Cape Beaufort, south to southeast winds 20 to 25 knots. For tonight, again, pretty nice here along the southwest coast. A fair amount of clearing, western half of the state and up into the north slope of the Arctic coast with high pressure. Low pressure here in the Gulf of Alaska and good southeast flow ahead of this front, pushing that warm front up to the North Gulf Coast. So a good shot of moisture coming in with that, especially along the coastal areas there. Cordova, say over toward Yakutat, drying out over the southern panhandle as that moisture pulls northwestward, and upper-level high pressure builds in. Otherwise, some snow showers for the Alaska Peninsula with diminishing winds, but those hold on, becoming more scattered, less heavy with lighter winds for the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. Big area high pressure here out over the Bering Sea. Front weakening, dry for the panhandle, maybe a few sunbreaks tomorrow, but cloudy with areas of moisture along the North Gulf Coast, southern Alaska. Big storm coming up into the southern Gulf of Alaska on Saturday, but missing the panhandle.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.